My father was halfway through calling me jealous when I opened the black ledger he had kept for 12 years and read the first sentence on the inside cover. Loans repaid with interest, no exceptions. The dining room went so quiet I could hear my aunt's bracelet tap against her glass. Across the table, my sister had tears on her cheeks. My cousins were staring at the columns, and my father finally understood that the rule he had used to squeeze $5,000 out of me was about to cost him a lot more than that. To understand how a family argument over one loan turned into a full accounting of $120,000, a shared fund, and every exception he swore he never made, I have to go back to the day my father created what he proudly called the family bank. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because family money stories always seem to hit differently depending on what kind of table you grew up sitting at. A quick note: some details have been changed for privacy and storytelling, but the emotions at the heart of this are real. Now let me take you back to the beginning, because my father did not wake up one morning and become the kind of man who could forgive one child's six-figure debt while hounding another for $5,000. He built that version of himself slowly, one rule at a time. My father, Roland Mercer, liked systems. That was the word he used. Systems. He had a system for where the snow shovels went in the garage. He had a system for Thanksgiving seating. He had a system for which gas station had the cheapest premium fuel, and if you filled up anywhere else, he would talk about it for 15 minutes like you'd taken food off the table. He wasn't poor. He had been a regional sales manager for a commercial equipment company for almost 30 years, and he did well enough to retire at 62 with two paid-off vehicles, a house with a brick mailbox, and the kind of workshop where every screwdriver had a shadow outline on the wall. To strangers, that made him seem disciplined. To us, it meant every normal family event came with a policy attached. Birthday gifts had price brackets. Christmas dinner started at 2, not 2:05. If you borrowed his truck, you returned it with the tank full and the receipts in the cup holder. He had a voice he used when he was being reasonable, and somehow that voice always meant everyone else was about to be unreasonable if they disagreed. I was the oldest son. My name is Caleb. At the time this started, I was 27, working as an estimator for a small construction firm outside Columbus, driving a 10-year-old Accord, and trying to save for a down payment on a condo that did not have neighbors above me learning drums at 11 at night. I was not rich. I was not reckless either. I had my father's boring parts without his need to turn every boring part into a ceremony. I paid bills early. I kept spreadsheets. I checked the little box that said "Remember this device" and still wrote the password in a notebook because I trusted paper more than my memory. My sister Marissa was 4 years younger. If you asked my father, she was creative. If you asked anyone who had ever co-signed anything for her, she was expensive. She could walk into a room late, holding an iced coffee and wearing sunglasses on her head in December, and somehow make my father smile before anyone asked why she was late. She was funny, I will give her that. She had my mother's face and my father's talent for turning a mistake into someone else's problem. If she overdrafted, the bank app was confusing. If she missed a car payment, the reminder must have gone to spam. If she borrowed money and did not pay it back, she was under stress. Our mother, Elaine, died when I was 23. Cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to funeral. After she passed, my father got more rigid, not less. I think grief scared him because it was the one thing he couldn't organize into labeled bins. So he organized us. He started Sunday dinners again, even though my mother had been the one who made those dinners warm. He sent group emails about estate documents and emergency contacts. He made a laminated sheet with the garage code, the alarm code, the plumber's number, the name of the attorney who had handled my mother's will, and the location of the fireproof box. That fireproof box mattered later. At the time, it was just another Roland thing. Black, heavy, with a brass combination dial. He kept it in the closet of the den, under a shelf of tax returns. The first time he showed it to me, he opened it like a museum guide revealing a relic. Inside were insurance policies, car titles, my mother's death certificate, and a spiral-bound ledger with a black cover and reinforced corners. "This," he said, tapping the ledger, "is going to keep everybody honest." I almost laughed because everyone in our family already knew that when my father said everybody, he usually meant anybody but himself. But I didn't laugh. He was still thin from the months after my mother's funeral, and his wedding ring kept sliding around his finger. So I stood in the den, smelling dust and printer ink, and watched him take out the ledger. The first page had his handwriting at the top. Family Bank. Under that, in block letters, he had written the sentence that would come back years later and sit in the center of the table like a loaded thing. Loans repaid with interest. No exceptions. He underlined no exceptions twice. The family bank started with my mother's life insurance and a portion of my parents' savings. My father said Mom had always wanted the kids to have help if they needed it, but not handouts, because handouts made people weak. That was his word. Weak. So he would hold some money in a separate account, available for emergencies, tuition gaps, down payments, medical bills, small business expenses, and anything else he approved. A loan from the family bank would be better than a credit card, he said, because the interest would stay in the family. It would teach responsibility. It would build the fund back up for the next person. "We are not doing charity," he told us at the first dinner where he explained it. "We are doing discipline. Your mother believed in helping, but she also believed in accountability." My Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, looked down at her plate when he said that. I noticed because she had been the one at the hospital every Tuesday, and if my mother had a belief about family, it was usually that you brought soup without asking for a notarized repayment schedule. But nobody challenged him. Not then. My younger brother Aaron borrowed first, $8,000 for trade school after a scholarship fell through. My father wrote it into the ledger in blue ink. Date, borrower, purpose, principal, rate, payment schedule, balance, 5% annual interest, payable monthly after a 6-month grace period. Aaron signed a 1-page note my father printed from the internet and modified with a paragraph about family trust. Aaron grumbled but signed. 2 years later, he had paid it off, including $600 and something in interest. My father brought the ledger to Sunday dinner and announced it like Aaron had just completed military service. "That," he said, pointing his fork at Aaron, "is how a man handles his obligations." Aaron rolled his eyes, but he looked proud. We all did. A little. There is a strange thing that happens in families like mine. When the rules are unfair but familiar, compliance starts to feel like love. If you can pay on time, if you can keep the peace, if you can avoid being the problem, you tell yourself the system is working because you are surviving it. My first loan came a year later, $12,000 for the condo down payment. I had saved most of it, but the lender wanted reserves, closing costs were higher than expected, and I was short. I did not want to ask my father. I spent 2 weeks running numbers, looking at personal loans, even considering walking away from the condo. Then my father called and asked why I sounded distracted. I told him. "Use the bank," he said immediately. "Dad, I don't want family money involved." "It is not family money, it is a family institution. There is a difference." That was Roland all over. A phrase could make anything sound less personal. He invited me over the next night, sat me at the dining room table, and opened the ledger. He had already filled my name in. Caleb Mercer. Purpose: condo down payment and closing gap. Principal: $12,000. Rate: 5%. First payment due: January 15th. Minimum: $350. He slid the note across to me with a pen on top. "No shame in borrowing," he said. "Shame is in not paying back." I signed. Then I paid. Every month. Sometimes I paid more. When I got a year-end bonus, I put half of it toward the balance. When my car needed a transmission, I did not skip a payment. I put the repair on a low-interest card and hated myself for 3 months, but I paid my father on the 15th because the ledger sat in my head like a second mortgage. My father would call if the payment didn't post by dinner. "Just checking," he would say. "It's scheduled." Scheduled is not paid. It clears tomorrow. Then tomorrow it will be paid. Tonight it is late. That was one of the first times I remember holding the phone away from my face and just looking at it. My payment was not late. The automatic transfer was pending. But in his mind, if he could make me feel late, he had defended the system. 2 cousins borrowed too. My cousin Ben took $7,000 after a basement flood insurance did not fully cover. My cousin Tessa took $15,000 to finish nursing school when her financial aid got tangled up. Both were technically on my mother's side, but my father included them because he wanted the family bank to feel like a legacy instead of a private checking account. Ben paid him back in 18 months. Tessa paid hers back over 4 years, sometimes with $50 payments when money was tight. My father still charged interest. He still mailed statements. Yes, mailed. Folded paper, stamped envelope, even though everyone involved had email. "Paper makes people serious," he told me. And maybe it did. Tessa kept those statements in a shoebox. Ben kept his in a file folder labeled Roland Loan, as if that was a tax category. None of us loved it, but there was a clarity to it. Borrow, repay, interest, no exceptions. It felt harsh, but at least it looked equal. Marissa's first loan was different from the start. She was 25 and wanted to open a boutique fitness studio with a friend named Kaylee, who used the word brand as a verb. They had found a storefront between a nail salon and a dog groomer. The plan involved bar classes, wellness workshops, and a wall of expensive leggings arranged by mood. Marissa needed $20,000 for build-out and equipment. My father called a family dinner to discuss it like we were investors in a startup. I remember the evening because Marissa arrived 30 minutes late carrying poster boards. Actual poster boards. She had glued photographs of studio mirrors, hardwood floors, and women smiling while holding green juice. My father beamed at her like she had invented exercise. "This is exactly the kind of ambition the bank was designed to support," he said. Aaron asked the obvious question. "Is there a business plan?" Marissa smiled at him. "I have projections." "That's not the same thing." My father cleared his throat. "Don't start." "I'm not starting. I'm asking." "Your sister is putting herself out there. That takes courage." I looked at the poster board with the green juice and thought, courage is easier when someone else buys the mirrors, but I did not say that. I had learned the economy of Sunday dinner. Save your breath for the ride home. My father wrote the loan into the ledger that night. I noticed because I was helping clear dishes and the ledger was open near his elbow. Marissa Mercer. Studio startup. Principal, $20,000. Rate, 3%. First payment due, TBD. TBD. I stood there with 3 plates in my hands, staring at those 3 letters. "Dad," I said quietly, "why is her rate 3? He looked up. "Because it is a business loan. Different category. Aaron's school was 5. Tessa's nursing school was 5. Those were personal development loans. That's a category now?" He gave me the look. The slow one over the glasses. "Do you need something, Caleb?" That was his warning. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a reminder that I was standing in his house, next to his ledger, questioning his system while my sister laughed in the kitchen. I put the plates in the sink and let it go. The studio lasted 9 months. That is not a joke. 9 months. It opened in March, held a ribbon cutting where my father wore a blazer and took pictures with a giant pair of scissors, then closed in December after Kaylee moved to Tampa with the mailing list and half the equipment. Marissa said Kaylee had betrayed her. Kaylee said Marissa had spent too much money on aesthetics and not enough on payroll. I did not know who was right. I knew my father never mailed Marissa a statement. I know because she told me, not in shame, in a laughing way at my condo, while eating the Thai food she had asked me to order because she was between cards. "Dad's not making me pay right now," she said. "He gets that I need to land." I was scraping rice into a bowl. Land from what? From the business failing, Caleb. Keep up. I paid him during my transmission repair. She waved a hand. You're different. You like structure. That sentence stuck because it was the first time I heard the family rule translated into its real form. I paid because I could tolerate being made to pay. She did not pay because she could not tolerate being made uncomfortable. My father called one discipline and the other compassion. Over the next decade, the family bank became a background hum. People borrowed. People repaid. My father kept the ledger. He loved showing it off. He would sit at the dining room table after coffee and update balances with a calculator, a pencil, and a blue pen for final entries. He had a little ritual. Pencil first, because math could be wrong. Pen after verification, because obligations were permanent. If you made a payment, he wrote the date and amount. If you missed a payment, he circled the due date in red. I had 2 red circles in 12 years, both for bank holidays that delayed transfers. He mentioned them every time I made a point about fairness. "Nobody's perfect," he would say, and tap the old circle like it was a criminal record. By 39, I had borrowed from the family bank 3 times, $12,000 for the condo, $4,000 after an emergency dental surgery, when my insurance decided one part of my mouth was cosmetic, $9,000 to replace my car after a truck rear-ended me and the settlement got delayed. I repaid all of it, principal and interest. The final car loan balance was $5,000, mostly because my father had applied payments in a way I did not love, but had not bothered fighting. I was making $250 a month, the last obligation I had to him, and I could see the finish line. I had a good life by then. Not flashy. Good. I was a project manager for the same construction company, which had grown from 12 employees to 40. I had a small house with a maple tree that dropped leaves into my gutters like it was being paid by volume. I was engaged to Nora, a school counselor with a laugh that made restaurants turn around. We were planning a simple wedding. Backyard ceremony, rented tent, barbecue. My friend Miguel playing guitar because he owed me after I helped him rebuild his deck. Nora understood my father faster than I did. The first time she came to Sunday dinner, he asked her what her 5-year plan was before he asked whether she wanted coffee. She answered politely. On the drive home, she said, "Your dad makes every conversation feel like a performance review." I laughed because it was accurate. Then I defended him because that is what you do before you are ready to be honest. He's just intense. "No," she said. "He's measuring. There's a difference." She was right. My father measured everyone. He measured effort, gratitude, income, punctuality, how much chicken you took from the platter, how quickly you offered to help clean up. The only person he never measured in public was Marissa. Her failures arrived pre-excused. By then, Marissa had borrowed again. $15,000 for credit cards after the studio. $12,000 for a certification program she did not finish. $8,000 for moving expenses when she left a boyfriend in Chicago. $25,000 for a townhouse down payment that somehow became rent support because the mortgage pre-approval disappeared. Another 10 here, another 5 there. The ledger knew the number before any of us did. $120,000 in principal. not including interest, because my father had stopped calculating interest on her entries around the third loan. We did not know that yet. We suspected. We joked privately. Aaron once said, "Marissa's page in the ledger is probably written in pencil and prayer." Tessa, who had paid interest while working night shifts, did not laugh. She just said, "One day someone should ask to see it." One day came at my father's 68th birthday dinner. It was held at his house because he said restaurants overcharged for steak and undercooked it out of arrogance. Nora and I arrived early with a cake from the bakery my mother used to love. The house looked the same as it always did. Brass lamp in the front window. Family photos arranged by height of frame, not chronology. My mother's blue glass bowl on the sideboard, filled with wrapped mints nobody ate but everybody recognized. Marissa arrived late. She had a new haircut, a beige coat that looked more expensive than my lawnmower, and the tense brightness she got when she was about to tell everyone something and needed us to clap before we understood it. "I have news," she said before taking off the coat. My father stood straighter. "Good news?" "Really good. I got accepted into the program." Nobody knew what program. That was normal with Marissa. Her life had chapters that opened in the middle. "The coaching certification," she said, seeing our faces. "The executive wellness thing. It's very selective." Aaron muttered, "Is it accredited?" My father shot him a look sharp enough to cut ribbon. Marissa kept going. Tuition was expensive. Travel was required. There would be a 6-month period where she could not work full-time because the program demanded focus. She said focus like it was a medical need. My father nodded through all of it, hands folded, expression solemn. Then he made the announcement that cracked the floor under everything. "Your sister and I have talked," he said after dinner, while Nora was carrying coffee cups in from the kitchen. "Given the circumstances, I have decided to forgive her outstanding family bank loans." At first, I thought I had misheard him. The dining room had that post-dinner clutter. Plates scraped clean, napkins twisted, cake crumbs near the edge of the table. Ben's little boy was in the living room making truck noises on the rug. My father's words landed in the middle of it like a glass breaking, except no one moved. Aaron said, "All of them?" "Yes." Tessa put down her fork. "How much are we talking about?" My father looked offended by the question. "That is between Marissa and the bank." "The bank?" Ben said. "You mean you?" My father smiled tightly. "I administer it." I looked at Marissa. She had arranged her face into something soft and wounded. She was staring at the cake, not at any of us. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice even, "you still have me paying on a $5,000 balance." He did not miss a beat. "Correct. So you're forgiving her balance while I keep paying mine? Your situations are different." "How?" He leaned back. "She needs help and you don't." There it was. Not hidden. Not softened. She needs help and you don't. 5 words that turned 12 years of rules into decoration. Nora's hand found my knee under the table. Not to stop me. Just to remind me I was not imagining it. I said, "The rule has always been repayment with interest. No exceptions." My father's eyes hardened. "Do not quote my own rules to me in my house." That was the line that told me he knew exactly what he was doing. For a second, nobody breathed right. The living room truck noises kept going. Somewhere in the kitchen, the ice maker dropped a batch into the tray, loud and ordinary. My father picked up his coffee as if the matter had been settled. Marissa wiped under one eye, though I had not seen a tear fall. "I didn't ask for this to become a trial," she said. "Nobody's putting you on trial," I said. "It feels like it." My father set the cup down. "Caleb, enough." I should have stopped there. The old version of me would have. The version trained by red circles and Sunday dinners and the fear of being called difficult would have swallowed it, paid the last 5,000, and complained to Nora in the car. But something about the way he said enough after announcing a private six-figure gift at a public table made my restraint feel like participation. "How much?" I asked. My father stared at me. "If we're discussing forgiveness from a family fund, how much is being forgiven?" "We are not discussing it. I am informing the family." Aaron laughed once. No humor in it. "That's convenient." Marissa pushed her chair back. "I knew this would happen. I told you they'd make me feel horrible." "Nobody made you borrow the money," Tessa said quietly. Marissa looked at her like Tessa had slapped her. "You don't know what I've been through." Tessa's face changed. Just a little. She had worked 12-hour shifts in compression socks while mailing my father checks for nursing school. She did not raise her voice. She said, "No, I know what repayment envelopes look like after night shift. That's what I know." My father stood. The chair legs scraped the floor. "This conversation is over." He could still do that then. Declare an ending and watch everyone obey. We left in fragments, coats gathered too quickly, leftovers forgotten. Nora and I drove home in silence for almost 10 minutes. The road from my father's neighborhood had 3 traffic lights before the highway. I remember each one was red. At the third light, Nora said, "Are you okay?" I looked at the green glow of the dashboard. "I don't know yet." That was not okay. No. And it wasn't just about money. That was the part that made my throat tighten. Because if it had only been money, I could have done the math and moved on. $5,000 was annoying, not life-ending. But it was not $5,000. It was my father looking at me, at all of us, and admitting there were 2 families inside our family. One family got rules, the other got rescue. The next morning, he sent an email. Subject line: Family Bank Clarification. I still remember the exact format because my father wrote emails like a man addressing a board of directors that had disappointed him. Family, last night's discussion became unnecessarily emotional. The family bank exists to strengthen the family, not divide it. As administrator, I retain discretion to make decisions based on need, character, and circumstances. Marissa's debt forgiveness is an act of support during a career transition. It is not open for debate. Caleb, your outstanding balance remains due under the existing schedule. Roland, no dad. No love, just Roland. I read it twice at the kitchen counter before work. Nora read it over my shoulder and said, "Need, character, and circumstances, character?" I laughed because if I didn't, I was going to throw my phone into the sink. I replied with 3 sentences. "Dad, please send me a current statement showing my balance, interest calculation, and payment history. Also, please confirm the written policy that allows discretionary forgiveness for one borrower while requiring repayment from another. Caleb." He called 9 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let that go too. The third time, I answered because I was in my car outside the office, and I knew if I didn't, he would keep calling until my phone became a fire alarm. "What are you trying to do?" He said. "No, hello. I'm asking for documentation." "You are trying to embarrass your sister." I asked for my own statement. "You copied the whole family. You announced the forgiveness to the whole family." He exhaled through his nose. I could picture him pinching the bridge of it. "You have always been like this, counting pennies, keeping score." That one got me because it was almost funny. The man who mailed statements to relatives accused me of keeping score. "Dad, you built a ledger." "Because people need structure." "Apparently not everyone." There was a pause. Then his voice dropped into that calm warning tone. "Be careful, Caleb. Jealousy is ugly on a grown man. I looked through my windshield at the office door. My coworker Luis was carrying a stack of blueprints under one arm and a gas station coffee in the other. Normal life kept moving, which felt rude. "I'm not jealous," I said. "Then stop acting like it." He hung up. That was escalation number one. Not the forgiveness, the framing. The moment he decided the problem was not unequal treatment but my character for noticing it. Once a petty tyrant feels challenged, they don't answer the challenge. They indict the challenger. By Friday, relatives were texting me. Aunt Linda wrote, "Your father says you're upset about Marissa. Call me when you can." Ben wrote, "Dude, what happened?" Roland said you're trying to block Risa's program. Tessa sent only, "He called you stingy to Uncle Paul." Stingy. That was the word he chose. I had paid him thousands in interest. I had skipped vacations, delayed repairs, and once ate peanut butter sandwiches for a week before payday because I refused to miss a family bank payment. But now I was stingy because I wanted the rule applied to the person who had benefited most from breaking it. I called Aunt Linda first. She answered on the second ring and did not waste time. "Tell me your side," she said. So I did. I told her about the announcement, the $5,000 balance, the email, the call. She was quiet for a long time. "Your mother would have hated this," she said. I sat down on the edge of my bed. Aunt Linda had never said anything like that before. She usually defended peace at all costs, mostly because she had watched my mother spend years smoothing Roland's edges until nobody remembered they were sharp. "Do you know how much Marissa owes?" I asked. "Not exactly. I know it's not small." "Dad won't say." "Of course he won't." "Why, of course?" She sighed. "Because if he says the number out loud, everyone gets to compare it to their own number. Your father loves fairness as long as he's the only one allowed to define it." That sentence stayed with me all weekend. On Sunday, I did not go to dinner. Neither did Aaron. Tessa said she was working, but I knew she had traded shifts to avoid it. My father responded by sending another email, this one shorter. "Disappointed by the lack of maturity today. Family is not a courtroom." I almost replied, "Then stop keeping exhibits." But Nora talked me out of it. For 2 weeks, I tried to resolve it normally. That part matters. I asked for my statement again. I asked whether the bank had written bylaws or policies. I asked whether my balance could be forgiven under the same standard. I suggested that if forgiveness was now available based on need, we define need and apply it retroactively to anyone who had borrowed during hardship. My father ignored the written questions and called instead. Every time. "You are making this bigger than it is." "Then send the paperwork." "This is not a business dispute." "You charged interest like it was." "I charged interest to teach discipline." "Did Marissa learn it?" That was when he raised my interest rate. I wish I were making that up. On a Wednesday evening, I came home from work to find an envelope from my father in the mailbox. Cream paper, blue ink. My name written in his careful block letters. Inside was a statement for my remaining car loan balance. The balance was no longer $5,000 and change. It was $6,187.40. There was a note clipped to the top. "Caleb, given your recent insistence on strict equality, I have reviewed your loan history and determined that the original 5% rate was below current family bank standards. To be fair to all borrowers, your current note will be recalculated at 7% retroactive to origination. Revised schedule enclosed. Roland." To be fair. I stood in my kitchen holding the paper while the oven timer beeped behind me. Nora came in from the living room, saw my face, and turned the timer off without looking at the stove. "What did he do?" I handed her the statement. She read it. Her mouth tightened. "He changed the rate because you complained about favoritism?" "Retroactively." Can he do that? It's family. That's what he'll say. Nora put the paper on the counter with 2 fingers like it had grease on it. No. That's what he says when he wants the benefits of a contract without the limits of one. That line was the first real pivot in my head. I had been thinking like a son. Hurt son. Annoyed son. Son with receipts. But still a son. Nora's sentence made me think like someone looking at an arrangement. A fund. Loans. Interest. Written statements. Multiple borrowers. A ledger. Money contributed back through repayments. My father wanted the family bank to be whatever served him in the moment. A moral lesson when he collected. A private favor when he forgave. A business when he charged interest. A family matter when anyone asked questions. What he didn't know yet was that the paperwork he loved so much had created the only lever I needed. I did not answer the statement that night. I put it in a folder. Then I dug through my file cabinet and pulled every family bank document I had. Original notes, payment confirmations, mailed statements, payoff letters, the 2 red-circled bank holiday notices, and the final letter from the condo loan where my father had written "paid in full" across the top, like a judge declaring sentence. The next morning before work, I scanned everything. I am not naturally dramatic, but I am very good at folders. By lunch, I had a digital folder named Family Bank. Inside were subfolders for Caleb, correspondence, statements, and questions. I made a spreadsheet with dates, payments, principal, interest, and notes. I did not know exactly what I was looking for yet. I just knew I wanted everything in one place before my father changed another rule. 2 days later, Ben called. "You get one of those new statements?" he asked. "No, just me so far." "Lucky you." "Why?" "Because he called me to ask whether I still had copies of my old statements. Said he was doing a historical audit." I sat up straighter at my desk. "A historical audit?" His words. I told him I had everything. He got weird. Weird how? Like he wanted me to say I didn't. That was the second pivot. I called Tessa that night. She answered from her car in a hospital parking lot, the background hum of traffic and tired nurses behind her. "Did my dad call you about statements?" She laughed once. "Yep." Asked if I had kept unnecessary paperwork. "What did you say?" "I said I'm a nurse, not an idiot." For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Tessa had every statement. Not only hers. She had copies of Ben's because he had asked her to organize his flood paperwork years earlier, and she had scanned them. She also had something I did not expect. Emails from my father praising her for repaying with interest and saying the family bank depended on every borrower honoring the same standard, so the fund would remain available for others. "He wrote that?" I asked. "Several times. He liked sending moral essays with balance reminders." "Can you forward them?" "Already did." When I opened her email, there they were. My father's words, dated and time-stamped, clean as glass. "Equal rules preserve equal dignity. A family fund only works when no borrower assumes their need outranks another's obligation. Interest is not punishment. It is replenishment for the next family member." I read that last one 3 times. Interest is replenishment for the next family member. He had written the argument against himself years before he needed it. That weekend, my father escalated again. He came to my house unannounced on Saturday at 8:15 in the morning. I was in the driveway cleaning leaves out of the garage track because the door had started sticking. He pulled up in his silver SUV, parked behind my car, and got out holding a manila envelope. "We need to talk," he said. Nora was inside making coffee. I could see her through the front window, still in sweatpants, watching him with the expression she usually reserved for parents at school board meetings who thought Google made them experts. "Okay," I said. He did not ask to come in. He walked into my garage like it was an extension of his house and put the envelope on my workbench. I am offering you a chance to stop this before it damages the family permanently. Stop what? The campaign. Asking for documents is not a campaign. He opened the envelope and took out a printed agreement. 1 page. He had drafted a settlement, though he did not call it that. It said he would waive the retroactive interest increase if I acknowledged the administrator's discretion in all family bank matters, agreed not to discuss Marissa's loans with relatives, and resumed payments on my original balance without further dispute. I looked at the signature line with my name typed under it. You brought me a gag order in my garage? His jaw moved. Don't be childish. That's what this is. It is a family confidentiality agreement. Dad. Sign it, Caleb. Take the win. You are upset. I understand that. I'm prepared to be generous. That almost did it. Not the paper. The word generous. He had invented an illegal-looking retroactive interest change, then offered to undo it if I stopped talking, and he called that generosity. I said, no. His face went still. Excuse me? I'm not signing that. Then the revised balance stands. Then send me the documents that give you authority to revise it. He stepped closer. He was not a tall man, but he knew how to occupy space. I had watched him do it to salesmen, mechanics, teenage waiters who forgot lemon. You think because you manage job sites now, you can talk to me like one of your subcontractors? I wiped my hands on a rag. I think if you want this to be a bank, it needs rules. If you want it to be family, it needs fairness. Right now, you're using whichever word gets you what you want. For a second, I saw something honest flash across his face. Not guilt. Anger that I had said it plainly. You are jealous of your sister, he said. You always have been. She has a bigger heart than you. People help people like that. You keep accounts because you don't know how to love without a receipt. Nora opened the door from the kitchen to the garage. Roland, she said, calm as a locked door. You need to leave. He looked past me at her. This is family business. Then act like family. He gathered the paper slowly. Before he left, he turned back to me. Last chance. Keep pushing, and everyone will see exactly what kind of son you are. He drove away without checking behind him, and for once I was glad my driveway was too narrow for dramatic exits. Nora came into the garage and stood beside me. You know what he just confirmed, right? She said. That he's lost his mind? That he's scared of people talking. I kept the unsigned agreement. Of course I did. I scanned it before the coffee was done. By then, the family had split into camps. Not loud camps. Polite Midwestern camps. People who texted me privately but said nothing in the group chat. People who told Marissa they supported her but asked Tessa what she knew. People who thought my father was being unfair but also thought maybe I should let it go because he was old and grief had made him rigid. That last one annoyed me most. Grief did not raise my interest rate. Grief did not draft a gag order. Grief did not call relatives and tell them I was stingy. Marissa posted a long thing on Facebook without naming me. It started, sometimes the people closest to you resent your healing. There was a picture of a coffee mug, a journal, and a candle. She wrote about choosing abundance over scarcity, about how family should not keep score, about how she was entering a season of growth and would not apologize for accepting support. My aunt commented with a heart. 3 of her friends wrote Queen. I stared at the post in my car during lunch and felt the kind of tired that makes your bones seem older than your age. I did not comment. I took a screenshot. That night, Aaron came over. He brought beer and a cardboard box. Inside were his family bank records, trade school loan, payment receipts, his final payoff letter, and 2 notes from my father reminding him that late payments would affect future borrowing eligibility. Future borrowing eligibility, Aaron said, sitting at my kitchen table. Like he was Equifax with a mustache. Nora laughed from the sink. I spread Aaron's papers beside mine and Tessa's forwarded emails. The table began to look like a small civil case. Stacks, sticky notes, highlighted lines. I did not know what I planned to do with all of it. I just knew the shape was changing. This was no longer Caleb complaining. It was a pattern. Aaron took a drink and said, "Do you know about the shared fund?" I looked up. The bank? No, the other one. He told me that after Mom died, Dad had created a separate family maintenance fund. It was supposed to cover group expenses, cemetery upkeep, family reunions, emergency help for older relatives, repairs to Grandma's old cabin that everyone still used twice a year. Some of it came from Dad. Some came from interest earned by the family bank. Some came from voluntary contributions at reunions. I knew about pieces of that. I had paid into the cabin repairs twice. I had sent $500 one year when Aunt Linda needed help with a medical bill, and Dad collected contributions. But I had not understood that my father tracked it as a separate fund. "How do you know?" I asked. "I saw the spreadsheet when I fixed his printer last summer. Shared family fund." There was a tab. "Did you see balances?" "Not much. Enough to know it exists." The next part still makes me pause when I think about it, because it was the moment the dispute stopped being emotional and became serious. Aaron said, "He told Marissa at Thanksgiving he would make the bank whole from the shared fund if anyone made a fuss." I was in the hallway. They didn't know I could hear them. I stared at him. "Say that again." He said, "If they get hung up on the paper balance, I'll cover it from the shared fund and close the entry." Nora turned from the sink. "That's not forgiveness. That's moving other people's money." Exactly. If my father wanted to gift Marissa $120,000 of his own money, that was ugly and unfair, but it was his money. If he wanted to erase a loan balance by using a fund partly built from other borrowers' interest and family contributions, that was different. That meant the people he had forced to repay with interest would indirectly cover the person who had not repaid at all. I slept badly that night. Around 2:30, I got up and sat in the kitchen with the laptop open, reading every document again. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator's low hum. Nora had left a sticky note on the laptop before bed. "Don't spiral without water." I smiled at it, got a glass, and kept working. By morning, I had a list of questions. Who had contributed to the family bank principal after Mom's original money? Were repayments deposited into the same account? Was interest transferred to the shared family fund? Who had authority over the shared fund? Were family bank borrowers ever told their interest could be used to cover another borrower's forgiveness? Had my father documented Marissa's forgiveness as a write-off, a gift, a transfer, or nothing at all? The questions were dry. They were also dangerous, because my father had trained us to accept his authority as a substitute for answers. Once we asked the right questions, his authority was not enough. I needed the ledger. Not summaries, not statements, the ledger itself. There was one person who might help. Mrs. Alvarez. Her first name was June, but nobody called her that. She had been my parents' neighbor for 20 years and my mother's friend before that. After Mom died, she became my father's informal bookkeeper. Not an employee exactly, more like a retired payroll clerk with a fondness for order and a soft spot for widowers who brought her snowblower back full of gas. Every quarter she came over to help my father reconcile accounts, file receipts, and prepare the envelopes he mailed. She was the only person besides him I had ever seen handle the ledger. Calling her felt like crossing a line. It also felt necessary. I waited until Monday after work and sat in my car outside the grocery store, because somehow that felt less conspiratorial than calling from home. She answered with the television low in the background. "Caleb, honey, everything all right?" That almost broke me. Nobody in this mess had started a conversation by asking that. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Alvarez. I have a question about Dad's family bank records." The television clicked off. "I wondered when one of you would call." I closed my eyes. She knew. I did not ask her to betray confidences. I was careful. I asked whether she had copies of statements that involved my loans. She said yes. I asked whether she had ever been asked to help close out Marissa's debt. She was quiet. "Your father asked me how to record a forgiveness," she said finally. "For how much?" "Caleb." "I know. I'm sorry." She sighed. "120,000 in principal." I don't know what interest would have been. He stopped calculating it properly years ago. I told him if he wanted to forgive it, he needed to mark it as a personal gift from himself, not adjust the bank records. He did not like that answer. My hand tightened around the phone. Did he mention using the shared fund? Another silence. Longer. He mentioned transferring money between family accounts to balance the books. There it was. "Mrs. Alvarez, do you have copies of the ledger?" "Not the whole ledger. I have scans of pages he asked me to reconcile, and I have the reconciliation sheets." "Would you be willing to share pages that relate to my accounts?" "Yes." "And pages that show the rule?" "Yes." She paused, then added, "I will not hide records that affect money you and the others paid into. Your mother would not have wanted that." I sat in the grocery store parking lot with my forehead almost touching the steering wheel. The phrase "your mother would not have wanted" that had become the quiet permission everyone needed and nobody wanted to be first to use. Mrs. Alvarez emailed me that night. The subject line was, "Documents requested." No drama, no commentary. Attached were 12 PDFs. The first was a scan of the ledger's inside cover. Family Bank. Loans repaid with interest. No exceptions. The second showed my condo loan. Every payment, every interest calculation, every red circle. The third showed Aaron's loan. The fourth showed Tessa's. The fifth showed Ben's. Then came Marissa's pages. I had expected them to be bad. I had not expected them to feel physically different from the rest. Our pages were dense. Dates, payment amounts, recalculated balances, initials in the margin. Marissa's pages had blank spaces where payments should have been. Grace period extended. Payment deferred. Interest paused. New principal advanced. Consolidated balance. Deferred again. No supporting note. No signature. No schedule. No red circles. The numbers were worse in a clean way. $20,000, $15,000, $12,000, $8,000, $25,000, $10,000, $18,000, $12,000. Total principal advanced, $120,000. Payments received, $0. I sat at the kitchen table and read that line until it blurred. Payments received, $0. Nora sat across from me with her hands wrapped around a mug. She did not say "I told you." She did not say anything for a while. Then she said, "What are you going to do?" I did not answer right away. Because there were two paths. One was emotional. I could forward the pages to everyone with a subject line like, "Since we're being honest and watch the family explode." It would feel good for about 5 minutes and bad for years. My father would call it an attack. Marissa would cry. People would pick sides based on who they already loved more. The facts would become ammunition, not resolution. The other path was procedural. Slower. Cleaner. Harder to dismiss. My father loved procedure. He loved rules, ledgers, family meetings, signatures, and phrases like administrator discretion. If he wanted to live inside that world, I could meet him there. I opened a new document and titled it Family Bank Stakeholder Questions. That word, stakeholder, came from my job. In construction, a stakeholder is anyone with a real interest in the outcome. Owner, tenant, architect, subcontractor, city inspector, neighbor whose driveway you block if you mess up the delivery schedule. You do not get to pretend they don't exist just because their name is not on the biggest contract. If their money, property, access, or obligations are affected, they get notice. The family bank had stakeholders, borrowers who repaid with interest, family members whose contributions went into shared accounts, people who had been told the fund existed for everyone, not as a private rescue line for one person. My father could call himself administrator, but an administrator is not an owner of everyone else's money. I spent the next week building the case like a bid package. I made a timeline: mother's death, creation of family bank, first loans, written rule, interest terms, repayments, Marissa's advances, deferred entries, father's birthday announcement, retroactive interest letter, gag agreement, Aaron's overheard shared fund comment, Mrs. Alvarez's reconciliation note. I made a comparison table, not inside the final script, obviously, but in real life it was a table, and it was devastating because numbers don't get embarrassed. Aaron, $8,000 borrowed, $8,642 repaid. Tessa, $15,000 borrowed, $17,910 repaid. Ben, $7,000 borrowed, $7,534 repaid. Caleb, $25,000 total borrowed across 3 notes. $28,870 repaid, with $5,000 remaining under Dad's calculation. Marissa, $120,000 borrowed, $0 repaid. Interest charged, paused, waived, or not calculated. I added citations to documents, page numbers, dates, quotes from my father's emails. Interest is replenishment for the next family member. Equal rules preserve equal dignity. No borrower assumes their need outranks another's obligation. Then I called Ben, Tessa, and Aaron and asked if they were willing to stand behind a request for a family bank meeting. Not a fight. A meeting. Agenda in advance. Records present. Shared fund protected. Equal treatment defined. Ben said yes immediately. Tessa said, I have been waiting 12 years for someone to use his own stationery against him. Aaron said, can we make him sit at the card table? We could not. But I appreciated the spirit. I sent the email on a Thursday morning at 8 o'clock because my father checked email with breakfast and I wanted him to have the whole day to choose his response instead of claiming surprise. Subject: Request for Family Bank Records Meeting. Dad, given your announcement for giving Marissa's outstanding family bank loans while continuing to enforce repayment from other borrowers, several of us are requesting a meeting to review the family bank ledger, repayment standards, and shared fund boundaries. The issue is not whether family members may help one another. The issue is whether funds built from borrower repayments, interest, and family contributions may be used to forgive one borrower's obligations while enforcing others. Please bring the original ledger, bank records showing deposits and transfers between the family bank and shared family fund, and any written policy authorizing discretionary forgiveness. Until this is resolved, I dispute the retroactive interest increase on my account and will hold regular payments in a separate account. Caleb, I copied Aaron, Ben, Tessa, Aunt Linda, and Mrs. Alvarez. I did not copy Marissa at first. Then I stared at the email for a full minute and added her. If her debt was the subject, she needed notice. I did not want my father to claim I had gone behind her back. His reply came 42 minutes later. Absolutely not. That was the whole email. Tessa replied all. Then please confirm that no money from the shared family fund will be used to cover or offset Marissa's family bank balance. Ben replied next. And please send my full repayment history and where my interest payments were deposited. Aaron added, same for mine. Aunt Linda surprised me. She wrote, Roland, this should be discussed with everyone affected. That was the first visible crack in his authority. Not me. Not the borrowers. Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, the peacekeeper, saying in writing that everyone affected had a right to discuss it. My father's next email was longer and worse. I am saddened by the tone here. Caleb has clearly influenced several family members into treating a private act of compassion as misconduct. I will not subject Marissa to a hostile meeting designed to shame her. The shared fund remains under my management, as it always has. No one has ever questioned my integrity until now. Marissa replied from her phone. I can't believe this. I am literally shaking. You all care more about money than my mental health. There were 3 dots for a while. Then another message. Especially you, Caleb. You have always acted like being responsible makes you better than me. I sat at my desk reading that, and for a moment, guilt did what guilt does. It looked for a door. Maybe I was being harsh. Maybe I was turning my sister's failures into a public record. Maybe I could afford the 5,000 and she really couldn't afford the 120. Maybe family was supposed to absorb unfairness quietly because the alternative was ugly. Then Tessa forwarded me a private message Marissa had sent her 2 months earlier. It was a screenshot. Marissa had written, Dad said once the new program starts, he can clean up the old bank stuff so I don't have that hanging over me. Finally. I swear Caleb would invoice a drowning person for the rope. That sentence ended the guilt. I stared at the words clean up the old bank stuff. She knew. She knew this was not just Dad being generous. She knew there was a record to clean. She knew I would object because the rule had mattered when it applied to me, and she had turned that into a joke about a drowning person. That was the moment I stopped trying to convince my father to be fair voluntarily. I did not threaten. I did not insult. I sent one more email. Dad, if you will not hold a voluntary meeting, then I am asking each family bank borrower and shared fund contributor to withhold further contributions or payments until records are provided. I am also asking that no transfer from the shared family fund occur without written notice to all contributors. If funds are transferred to offset Marissa's balance without stakeholder consent, I will treat that as misappropriation of shared contributions and will seek outside advice. Caleb. Outside advice. 2 bland words that did more than anger could have done. My father called immediately. I did not answer. He left a voicemail. You are making accusations you do not understand. You are playing with fire, and you are going to burn this family down over your ego. Call me. I saved it. Then I called someone who actually understood nonprofit accounts, family trusts, and informal pooled funds. Not a lawyer yet. A CPA named Denise who had handled books for our company on a messy project years earlier, and had once explained retainage to a room full of angry subcontractors without raising her voice. I paid for an hour of her time. I described the family bank, the repayments, interest, shared fund contributions, and possible transfer. I did not ask her to be my attorney. I asked what questions a reasonable person should ask before money moved. She listened, took notes, and said, informal family arrangements are messy, but money still has a trail. The key issue is representation. What were contributors told their money was for? If interest was framed as replenishing a lending pool for all, and contributions were framed as shared family purposes, using those funds to erase one person's debt without notice is at minimum a governance problem. Depending on amounts and documents, It can become more than that. What should I ask for? Ledger, bank statements, deposit history, transfer history, written terms, and written consent for any use outside the stated purpose. Also ask whether he has reported forgiven debt or gifts appropriately, but that may be more pressure than you need. I wrote that down. Then she said, "Do not make this about your sister's character. Make it about fund purpose and equal application of written rules. If you make it emotional, he'll win the room. If you make it procedural, he'll have to answer." That became my strategy. For the next 2 weeks, my father tried everything except answering. He called Aaron and said I was manipulating him because I had always been competitive with Marissa. Aaron told him, "Dad, I don't need Caleb to explain zero payments to me." He called Ben and suggested that if Ben pushed this, future help for Ben's kids might not be available. Ben said, "Then I guess your family bank is more of a loyalty program." He called Tessa and told her nurses should have more compassion. Tessa said, "I do. That's why I know the difference between help and enabling." He called Aunt Linda and, according to her, used my mother's name 3 times in 5 minutes. That backfired. Aunt Linda had spent years being polite about my father because my mother loved him. Hearing him use my mother as a shield for Marissa's unpaid loans made something in her go cold. She called me after. "I have something," she said. "What kind of something?" "Your mother's letter." I had no idea what she meant. Before my mother died, she had written letters, one to each of us, one to my father, one to Aunt Linda. Mine was in a box in my closet. I had read it once, the week after the funeral, and then put it away because her handwriting made the loss too sharp. Aunt Linda's letter apparently mentioned the money. She said she wanted the life insurance to help the kids when help would change the outcome, Aunt Linda told me. She wrote, "Please do not let Roland turn help into control." I had to sit down. Aunt Linda's voice shook. I should have said something sooner. "No," I said. "You kept her letter private. That's not wrong. It matters now." "It does, but only if you're comfortable." "I am done being comfortable." She sent me a photo of that paragraph. I did not plan to use it as a weapon. It was too personal. But it told me something important. My mother had seen this in him. She loved him, and she had still seen it. The family bank had not been her dream. It had been his version of her generosity, filtered through his fear of losing control. The meeting finally happened because of Mrs. Alvarez. My father had refused us for 3 weeks. Then Mrs. Alvarez emailed him, copying the rest of us, with a tone so polite it could have been embroidered. "Roland, since my reconciliations have been referenced in recent conversations, I am no longer comfortable assisting with any family bank or shared fund records unless all affected parties have reviewed the current ledger and account purposes. Please schedule a meeting or find another bookkeeper. June Alvarez." My father could ignore his children, he could bully cousins, he could guilt Aunt Linda, but he needed Mrs. Alvarez because she knew where the bodies were buried, financially speaking, and because replacing her would mean explaining the system to an outsider. He scheduled the meeting for the following Sunday at 3 o'clock. His email said, "Attendance limited to immediate family and relevant parties, no spouses." Nora read that and laughed. "No spouses means no witnesses he can't shame," she said. I replied, "Nora will attend with me as my household is affected by ongoing payment demands and disputed balances." He replied, "Unacceptable." I replied, "Then I will not attend, and my payments remain held." 5 minutes later, "Fine." That small fine was the first payment on the satisfaction account. Sunday arrived with cold rain, the kind that makes every window look tired. Nora and I drove to my father's house with a folder box on the back seat and the original cream envelope in my lap. I wore a plain blue sweater because Nora said if I dressed like court, he'd accuse me of staging court. She was probably right. In the car, she said, "What do you want out of today?" I looked at the windshield wipers dragging water sideways. Equal treatment, shared fund protected, public record corrected. And from him? That was harder. I don't know. Yes, you do. I did. I wanted him to admit it, not apologize in the full sense. I knew better. But admit the rule had been fake. Admit he had used responsibility as a leash on some of us, and compassion as a cushion for Marissa. Admit that the ledger did not make him fair. It only made his unfairness legible. I want him to stop calling it love, I said. Nora nodded. Then keep the meeting on the documents. Let the documents do the part he won't. When we arrived, cars already lined the curb. Aaron's truck, Tessa's compact SUV with hospital parking stickers, Ben's minivan, Aunt Linda's old Camry, Marissa's white crossover, parked crooked across the edge of the driveway like a metaphor trying too hard. Inside, the dining room had been arranged like my father was chairing a hearing. Ledger at the head of the table. Legal pad to his right. Calculator to his left. Water glasses set out. No snacks. Snacks would have suggested hospitality. This was governance. Marissa sat beside him in a cream sweater, hair tucked behind one ear, eyes already pink. She had tissues in her sleeve. I noticed because she pulled one out before anyone said anything. Mrs. Alvarez sat near the sideboard with a folder on her lap. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were sharp. Aunt Linda sat across from her, hands folded. Aaron leaned against the wall because he said sitting made him feel like he was at parent-teacher night. Tessa had a notebook. Ben had a binder so overstuffed the rings did not close. My father waited until everyone settled, then said, "I want to begin by saying how disappointed I am that we are here." Nora's hand brushed mine under the table, a reminder. Documents. He continued. A private act of fatherly support has been twisted into accusations. Marissa has been hurt deeply. I have been accused of misconduct by my own son. That is not something I will forget. He looked at me when he said it. Old me would have defended myself immediately. Newer me opened my folder. "Can we start with the ledger rule?" I asked. His mouth tightened. "We can start with respect." "Then let's respect the written terms everyone was asked to follow." Aunt Linda made a small sound. Not a laugh. Not quite. My father's eyes flicked toward her, surprised she had not scolded me. He opened the ledger, not to the first page, to a blank page near the back where he had written, "Meeting notes." "The family bank has always been administered at my discretion," he said. "Where is that written?" Tessa asked. He looked annoyed. "It does not need to be written. I created it." Ben lifted his binder. "You told me in 2016 that the rules were written so nobody could claim favoritism." "I have the letter." "Ben, don't be pedantic." "I'm being charged 5% interest in past tense, Roland. Pedantic is on the table." I almost smiled. I didn't. My father turned to Mrs. Alvarez. "June, perhaps you can explain the bookkeeping side so we can stop this theater." She did not move for a second. Then she opened her folder. "The bookkeeping side is straightforward," she said. "The ledger records loans. Most borrowers have principal, interest, payments, and balances. Marissa's entries are inconsistent. Several interest calculations were paused or omitted. No payments are recorded." Marissa made a wounded noise. "I paid in other ways." Everyone looked at her. "Emotional support," she said, which was brave in the way walking into traffic is brave. Aaron coughed into his fist. My father said, "That is not helpful, Marissa." It was the first time all day he had corrected her. I slid copies of the comparison table to the middle of the table. Not to everyone like a performance, just enough that anyone could pick one up. This is based on documents we have, I said. If anything is wrong, we can correct it with the ledger. My father did not pick up the paper. Marissa did. Her eyes moved down the numbers and stopped at her line. Why is mine highlighted? Because yours is the balance being forgiven. This is humiliating, Tessa said. So were red circles on statements when my payment was 3 days late after a double shift. We are discussing records. Marissa's tears came faster then. She looked at our father. You said you wouldn't let them do this to me. That sentence changed the room. Because until then, my father had been pretending this meeting was an unfortunate surprise created by my cruelty. But Marissa's words revealed planning. You said you wouldn't let them do this to me? Not. I didn't know. Not. Why are they saying this? She knew there was something to be protected from. My father put a hand on her shoulder. Enough. I said. No, that's actually important. What did you tell her we would do? He ignored me. The forgiveness stands. I am her father. I can forgive a debt. With your own money, yes, I said. Can you forgive it with the family bank's money? He looked at me like I had used a language he disliked. There is no distinction. There is. You made one for 12 years. You told us interest replenished the fund for the next family member. You told Tessa equal rules preserve equal dignity. You told Ben the money stayed in the family bank. You told me scheduled is not paid. So which is it? Is this your personal money, or is it a shared lending fund capitalized by repayments and interest? The room held still. My father tapped his pen once on the legal pad. You are not qualified to make that distinction. That's why I asked for records. You asked because you want to punish your sister. There it was again. The lowest point, though I did not know it until I was inside it. Marissa stood up so quickly her chair knocked the table leg. He does. He wants to punish me because I haven't lived my life like him, because I needed help, because I couldn't just be perfect little Caleb with his perfect payments and his perfect fiancé and his perfect little folders. Nora looked down at her hands. She knew better than to take the bait. Marissa turned to everyone. Do you know what it's like to fail in front of this family? He makes you feel like you're trash. All of you do. Dad is the only one who ever helped me without making me feel small. And now Caleb wants to drag every mistake I've ever made onto a spreadsheet because he can't stand that someone got something he didn't. She was crying hard by then. Real tears. I could see that. And that was what made it awful. She was not faking all of it. She did feel attacked. She did feel exposed. She did feel like my responsibility had been a silent accusation against her. Her pain was real. It just was not the whole truth. For a moment, the room shifted toward her. I felt it. Aunt Linda's face softened. Ben looked at the table. Even Aaron stopped leaning like he had a comeback ready. My father saw the shift and moved fast. This is what I mean, he said quietly. Look at what this is doing to her. Caleb, look at your sister. Is this worth $5,000? That line almost worked, because now the issue had been shrunk again. $5,000. My balance, my resentment, my sister crying. If I pushed back, I looked cruel. If I stopped, the shared fund disappeared behind her tears. I felt heat climb into my face. My hands wanted to shake, so I put them flat on the table. No, I said. My father nodded like he had won. Then I finished. It is worth $120,000, the shared fund, and 12 years of rules you applied to everyone except her. Nobody spoke. I reached into my folder and took out the scanned first page of the ledger. I had printed it on plain white paper, but the black cover edge was visible in the scan. My father's handwriting sat at the top like a witness. Before we talk about feelings, I want to read the rule you wrote. My father said, do not. That was when I knew he understood what was coming. I read it anyway. Loans repaid with interest, no exceptions. The words were small, 8 words if you count the fragment like a sentence. They did not sound dramatic when I said them. That made them worse. They sounded exactly like what they were. A rule. A rule my father had written, underlined, enforced, mailed, quoted, and used as moral proof that some of us were good borrowers and some of us were not yet disciplined enough. I turned the page to my own repayment history. The room could see the columns because I had enlarged the scan. Date, amount, interest, balance, years of blue ink. Every month accounted for. 2 red circles. This is mine, I said. I borrowed, I repaid. With interest. When I had car repairs, when I had dental surgery, when the bank transfer cleared 1 day later because of a holiday, the rule applied. No exceptions. I slid Erin's page beside it. This is Erin's. Same thing. Tessa's. This is Tessa's. She paid while working nights. Interest included. Ben's. This is Ben's. Flood repairs. Paid with interest. Then Marissa's page. The room saw it before I said anything. Blank payment columns have a sound in a quiet room. They make people inhale differently. This is Marissa's. $120,000 advanced. No payments recorded. Interest paused, deferred, or not calculated. And now the proposal is forgiveness. My father muttered, "She's different." There it was. The understanding moment did not arrive as a speech. It arrived as a mutter. She's different. I looked at him. I turned the page back to my own repayments and laid it directly beside Marissa's blank columns. I know, I said. That's the problem. For the first time in my adult life, my father did not have a sentence ready. He looked at the pages. Not at me, at the pages. I watched his eyes move from his handwriting to the highlighted totals to the phrase "no exceptions." I had seen my father angry. I had seen him cold. I had seen him smug. I had never seen him trapped by his own neatness before. The room changed around him, slowly. Tessa straightened. Ben picked up the comparison sheet again. Aunt Linda took off her glasses and pressed them into the napkin beside her. Mrs. Alvarez looked at my father with something like sadness, but she did not rescue him from it. My father tried the old route. As administrator, I can decide compassionate exceptions. I nodded. Then the rule is not no exceptions. He opened his mouth. I kept going, still calm because Nora's hand was on my knee, and because if I got loud, he would make loudness the story. If compassionate exceptions exist, we need to apply them equally. That means we review every borrower who repaid during hardship and decide what gets refunded. Tessa was in nursing school and working nights. Ben had a flooded basement. Erin had tuition. I had medical debt and car replacement. If Marissa's hardship means $120,000 gets forgiven, then we calculate everyone else's forgiven equivalent or refund their interest. Erin said, with interest on the refunds, obviously. My father shot him a look, but it had less power now. I said, or the rule remains what you wrote. Loans repaid with interest. No exceptions. In that case, Marissa needs a real repayment plan, just like everyone else had. Those are the consistent options, all forgiven or all enforced. Marissa sat down slowly. I can't repay $120,000, she said. For once, nobody argued with that, because it was probably true. I said, then we make a realistic plan, but it can't be zero while everyone else paid, and it can't come from the shared fund. My father seized on that. No one has proven I plan to use the shared fund. Mrs. Alvarez opened her folder. Roland, she said softly, You asked me, on April 4th, how to transfer shared fund money to close Marissa's family bank balance. I wrote in my notes that I advised against it without contributor consent. She slid a copy of her reconciliation note across the table. My father stared at it like it had appeared by magic. This was the trap springing fully shut. Not because we had tricked him, because he had made his own trail. The ledger, the emails, the statements, the reconciliation note, the attempted gag agreement. Every object on the table existed because my father believed paper made people serious. He was right. Paper made the room serious enough that his tone could not carry it anymore. Ben leaned forward. I contributed to the shared fund for the cabin roof. I did not contribute to pay off Marissa's loans. Tessa said, my interest payments were not a gift to her. Aaron said, same. Aunt Linda put her glasses back on. Her voice was quiet, but it landed harder than any of ours. Roland, Elaine wanted the money to help the family. She did not want it used to control the family. My father's face changed at my mother's name. For a second, I thought he would soften. Instead, he did what he always did when softness threatened to become accountability. He got formal. Do not bring your sister into this. Aunt Linda did not flinch. I am bringing her wishes into this. There's a difference. The rain tapped against the dining room windows. Nobody moved. My father looked older in that moment. Not because he was weak, but because authority ages fast when people stop feeding it. He turned to me. What do you want? It sounded like surrender. It wasn't. It was a negotiation tactic. He wanted me to overreach. He wanted me to say something angry, something punitive, something he could use to prove this had always been about jealousy. So I read from the document I had prepared. 1. No money from the shared family fund is used to offset Marissa's debt without written consent from contributors. 2. My retroactive interest increase is voided and my account returns to the original note terms. 3. The ledger is copied to all borrowers for their own accounts. 4. Going forward, any forgiveness or hardship adjustment must be offered under written criteria to all borrowers, past and present. 5. Marissa's balance is either treated as a personal gift from you, reported and documented as such, or converted into a repayment plan with 0 new advances until payments begin. Marissa whispered, 0 new advances? I looked at her. Yes. So I just drown? No, Tessa said before I could. You get a payment plan, like the rest of us got. My father rubbed his forehead. The pen lay beside his hand, unused. That detail stays with me. The man who always wrote things down could not write his way around this one. He tried one last time. Caleb, if I agree to fix your account, will you drop the rest? There it was. Naked. He was willing to buy me off with my own terms if I would leave everyone else's money exposed. I said, no exceptions, Father. Not Dad. Father. I did not plan that. It came out because the room no longer felt like a family dinner. It felt like the place where the role he had chosen finally got addressed by its proper title. His mouth tightened. Marissa looked at him, waiting for rescue. He looked at the ledger. And that was the real understanding moment. Not the muttered "she's different." That was instinct. The real moment came when he looked down and realized every path he had left required him to admit the double standard out loud. If he forgave Marissa through the family bank, he owed the same analysis to every borrower. If he used the shared fund, he had to get consent from people who were now watching him. If he called the bank his personal money, then every interest lecture and statement and replenishment email became evidence that he had misrepresented it. If he enforced the rule, Marissa had to repay. For years, he had been able to stand in the doorway between family and finance, stepping to whichever side protected him. We had just closed both doors. He picked up the ledger and flipped through pages too quickly. Blue ink flashed. Red circles. Payment columns. His own initials. I watched him search for an escape written in his own hand. There wasn't one. The silence stretched so long that Ben's phone vibrated on the table and he slapped a hand over it like it had cursed. Finally, my father said, "I will not bankrupt myself refunding everyone." Tessa said, "Then don't forgive only Marissa. She can't pay. Then she pays slowly. That could take 20 years. Aaron said, "Dad, you gave me 6 months before interest started when I was 19. 20 years sounds compassionate." That one landed. I saw it in my father's face. He was hearing his own language turned back on him, phrase by phrase, and each time it fit too well for him to dismiss. Mrs. Alvarez cleared her throat. "A repayment plan can be modest, but it needs to be real. It needs dates, amounts, and no additional advances hidden as adjustments." Marissa wiped her face. "I don't have money right now." Nora spoke for the first time since we sat down. "Then the first payment can be small, but small is different from none." Marissa looked at Nora like she had forgotten Nora was allowed to exist. My father said, "You don't get a vote." Nora nodded. "Correct. I get a voice because your revised statement came to the house where I live and affects the household I'm building with Caleb. But I don't need a vote. The ledger is doing fine without me." I loved her so much in that moment I almost lost my place. Aunt Linda pushed the reconciliation note closer to my father. "Roland, agree to protect the shared fund, today." He looked around the table. That was the moment he understood it was not Caleb versus Roland anymore. It was not even siblings versus Marissa. It was stakeholders versus an administrator who had lost consent. Consent is a quiet thing until it leaves. Then it is the loudest absence in the room. My father put both hands flat on the table. "Fine," he said. Nobody moved. He swallowed. "No shared fund money will be used for Marissa's loans." Mrs. Alvarez said, "I need that in writing." He glared at her. She held his gaze. He pulled the legal pad toward himself and wrote the sentence. His hand did not shake, but his handwriting lost its usual precision. No shared fund money will be used to offset, forgive, or close Marissa's family bank loan balance without written consent of contributors. He signed it. Mrs. Alvarez took the page, read it, and said, "Date it." He dated it. Then I said, "The retroactive interest." His eyes snapped to mine. For a second I saw the old fury. "How dare you ask for your 5,000 after I just gave ground?" But everyone was watching now, and the paper was still warm from his hand. He wrote, "Caleb's disputed retroactive interest recalculation is withdrawn. Original note terms apply." He signed and dated that too. "Copies," Ben said. My father looked like he might actually explode. Mrs. Alvarez took out her phone and photographed both pages before he could object. Then Aunt Linda did. Then Tessa. Then me. The sound of those phone shutters was the most satisfying applause I have ever heard. Marissa's repayment plan took longer. She cried through most of it. Some of the tears were fear, and I did not enjoy that. I need to be clear about this. Revenge stories can make a payoff sound clean, but sitting across from your sister while she realizes the cushion is gone is not clean. It is sad. It is necessary, but it is sad. The plan we settled on was almost gentle. 6-month pause while she completed the first part of her certification, but no new advances during that pause. After that, $300 a month for the first year, subject to review, with interest set at the lowest rate anyone had received, 3%. If her income increased, payments increased. If she missed 3 payments without documented hardship, no future family bank assistance. The balance would not disappear. It would be tracked. Statements would go to her and to Mrs. Alvarez. Any future forgiveness had to be offered under written criteria to every borrower who had repaid during comparable hardship. My father hated every word. Marissa hated that he was letting it happen. But neither of them could say the plan was cruel, because it was less harsh than what the rest of us had lived under. At one point, Marissa looked at me and said, "Are you happy now?" I could have said yes. A small part of me wanted to. Not because she was hurting, but because the room had finally stopped pretending. Instead, I said, "No, but I think this is fair." She looked away. My father closed the ledger near the end with both hands, pressing the cover down like he could hold the day inside it. "This family will not be the same after this," he said. Aunt Linda answered before anyone else. "It wasn't the same before this, Roland. We just stopped lying about it." That was the sentence that ended the meeting. People left slowly. No one hugged at first. Ben gathered his binder. Tessa took photos of the relevant ledger pages. Aaron asked Mrs. Alvarez if she wanted help carrying her folder to the car, and she said she was old, not porcelain. Marissa went upstairs without saying goodbye. My father stayed at the table, one hand on the ledger, staring at the comparison sheet. I was putting on my coat when he said my name. Caleb. I turned. For a second, I let myself hope. That is the embarrassing part. Even after everything, some child part of me still waited for my father to say, "I handled this badly," or "I was unfair to you," or even, "Your mother would have done it differently." He said, "You made me look weak today." There it was, the deepest injury in his mind. Not the unfairness, not the money, not the years of double standards, the appearance of weakness. I looked at him for a long moment. "No," I said. The ledger did. Then I left. In the car, Nora did not start the engine right away. Rain moved down the windshield in thin lines. My father's porch light was on behind us, yellow and familiar. "You okay?" she asked. I laughed once. It came out tired. "I think I just won an argument I wish we never had." She reached over and squeezed my hand. That's usually what family justice feels like. The aftermath was quieter than people expect. My father did not apologize. He did not suddenly become a fair-minded elder statesman of family finance. People like him rarely transform because one room sees them clearly. What changed was simpler and more useful. He lost unilateral control. Mrs. Alvarez refused to touch the family bank unless quarterly statements went to every borrower with an active balance and annual summaries went to contributors. Aunt Linda insisted the shared fund have 3 signers for any transfer over $500. Ben volunteered to set up a shared read-only folder for records, which my father called unnecessary right up until everyone agreed to use it. Tessa drafted hardship criteria in plain English because, as she put it, if hospitals can define charity care, Roland can define family care. My final balance returned to the original schedule. I paid it off 3 months later, partly because I wanted the tie cut and partly because I wanted the payoff letter. When it arrived, my father had written "paid in full" in his usual blue pen, but there was no note, no moral paragraph, no congratulations, just the words. I framed it. Not in the living room. That would have been too much. I put it in a file folder with the rest of the documents. But for one afternoon, I left it on the kitchen counter where I could see it while making coffee. Marissa made her first payment 9 months after the meeting, $300. Mrs. Alvarez sent the statement to her, my father, and herself. Then, because Marissa had agreed to transparent tracking as part of the plan, the rest of us received a summary showing that payment had begun. No commentary. No shame, just a line item. Payment received, $300. I stared at that line for a while. It was not enough to fix everything. It did not erase the years. It did not make Marissa responsible overnight or my father fair. But it was a number in a column that had been blank for 12 years. Sometimes justice starts smaller than the anger that demanded it. The family dinners changed. For a while, they stopped completely. Thanksgiving moved to Aunt Linda's house, where nobody brought a ledger and everyone was asked to bring either a side dish or ice. My father came, but he sat at the end of the table instead of the head, because Aunt Linda's dining room did not have a head in the way his did. It was round. I did not know whether she had done that on purpose. I chose to believe she had. Marissa and I did not become close. This is not that kind of ending. She avoided me for months, then sent a text after Nora and I got married. Congrats. The photos looked nice. I replied, thank you. Hope your program is going well. She wrote, it is. Harder than I thought. I almost typed, most things are when you pay for them. I did not. Growth is knowing which satisfying sentence to leave unsent. My father and I speak, but less. The conversations are cleaner now because I no longer pretend not to see the measuring. If he starts turning a normal update into an audit, I end the call. If he says something about responsibility with that old pointed tone, I say, careful, Dad, you'll make me ask for a ledger. He does not laugh. Aaron does. The shared fund survived. That matters more than the drama. It paid for Aunt Linda's roof repair the next spring after a storm peeled shingles off the back slope. 3 signers approved it. The purpose was documented. Nobody paid interest. Nobody got a speech. Aunt Linda cried when she got the check, not because of the money exactly, but because help arrived without a hook in it. A few months after that, Mrs. Alvarez mailed me a copy of the original ledger cover page. She had written a note on a yellow sticky. Thought you should have this? Rules are useful when they protect people from power, not when they protect power from people. I keep that note in the same folder as my payoff letter. The last ironic detail is this. My father still uses the phrase no exceptions, but not about money anymore. He uses it for harmless things now, like taking shoes off at the door or rinsing paintbrushes before they dry. At Nora's birthday dinner, he saw Aaron walk into our mudroom with wet boots and said, shoes off? No exceptions. The room went quiet for half a second. Then Tessa looked at me. Ben looked at Aaron. Aunt Linda pressed her lips together. Even Marissa, sitting near the window with a glass of iced tea, looked down at her lap like she was fighting a smile. My father realized what he had said. Color rose in his face. Aaron took his boots off very slowly and said, happy to follow a written policy. Nobody laughed loudly. That would have been too cruel. But the room breathed differently after that. Lighter. If there's anything I learned, it's that unfair families often survive by making the fair people feel petty for noticing. They turn records into resentment, questions into attacks, and consistency into cruelty. But sometimes the answer is not to yell louder. Sometimes it is to take the rule they made sacred, place it gently on the table, and ask them to live under it too. My father taught me that loans are repaid with interest, no exceptions. He was right about one thing. Interest does accumulate, so does truth.